Welcome, brothers. It's my distinct pleasure to do this presentation for the fraternity. My name is Dr. Lee Newman, and I'll talk about myself shortly in a minute. Just some etiquette on a webinar. If you're participating not on a dialed-in hardwired phone line, it's probably best to mute yourself. I have everybody muted while I present. If you do, and I encourage people to share and participate, I actually enjoy that and think that it adds tremendously to the learning process. If you could just identify yourself as you speak so that everybody can kind of get a picture of who's speaking and maybe like where they are, and if we know you, we can get a visual as well. And just before I started the recording, I asked people, and maybe I will unmute just for a second, to ask somebody that hasn't opened a practice yet what you hope to hear on this call tonight. Anybody like to chime in on that? And maybe not, so that's fine. I enjoyed putting this presentation together. I'm Dr. Lee Newman. I'm a second-generation chiropractor. As I joke, but as in most jokes, it's deep-rooted in the truth. After Little League didn't work out the way that I hoped that it would at age 13, there was nothing else that I wanted to do other than become a chiropractor. And this was, back a long time ago, in the fall of 1983, they changed the prerequisite requirements and made it a little bit tougher to get into chiropractic college. That would have been the natural matriculation, so I sped up my college undergraduate education. I took classes my senior year in high school, and I was able to enter Life College in Marietta, now Life University, in January of 83. At the age of 20, I graduated when I was 23. Went on to practice in my main practice. I'll show you a picture of it shortly. For 24 years, built a big, huge practice almost immediately. Actually, the actual story is I got to 50 visits a week real quick, and then I got stuck. And then by working with a coach, I ultimately went to 500 a week. And then ultimately, I've been able to work with associates to do a bunch of offices, and then ultimately clients around the country and just coaching them. So that my thumbprint, here is a picture of the main office that I practiced at from 1986 to 2010. These are all other offices that I've developed with associates. All of these practices have well, this one is a current one, but all the rest of them have been successfully sold. Like this used to say Newman. This used to say Newman. We're in the 13th floor of this building here. This doesn't no longer says Newman. In this building, like on the 4th or the 6th floor, this was the very first satellite office, right? As you can see, not the Taj Ma practice, and we're going to talk about that tonight as well. I pledged the Lambda chapter of our fine fraternity in April of 1984, so that was 31 years ago. In January of 1986, I had the great privilege of being elected the 21st president of Lambda, and there's the nice shot of me the night that I was elected. Also, I was just thinking about this, it was probably, at the time, both the largest number of the largest numbers of men ever enrolled at one chiropractic college. So we had 70 actives. So that would be a great vision to see enrollment at the schools both go up, and then participation in the fraternity go up as well. I'm duly sworn to ask the Field brothers to make sure that you're paying your dues. It all goes to a good cause. Okay, here we go. Bunch of people jumped on the call just for some chaos. If anybody would like to say hi and just say where they're calling from real quick, I'm going to unmute everybody. So where you guys are calling from? Tom, Nottingham. Hello? Wow, thanks a lot. So it's one of the cool things about webinars, right? So we've already heard, I'm in New York City, we've heard from Ohio, we've heard from Florida, I've now heard from Singapore, we've heard from Boston, we've heard from Vancouver. I'm good at math, I think that's 3 countries already. Who else is on the call? Thank you, and who else? All right, here we go. All right, here we go. The ABCs of opening a practice. Here's kind of my agenda. Why, when, other options, what space do we need, the build-out, lease, equipment, money, the government, ramp-up, staff, mistakes, personal health, and professionals. That was fast. We're going to do it a little slower. So the issue number 1 is why even open your own practice? And I think that this is a very important thing to take into deep consideration, and if you get to the end of that, both ways, if you make the decision that, yes, I need to open my own practice, inherent in that decision are responsibilities, risks, working for getting a vision of the reward, but a commitment that you make that I'm going to offer as both the most important and the most rewarding project of your life. And we're going to talk about that through the course of the hour. So you need to get clear on why you'd want to open your own office. So it's, to help more people and to get super clear on what the need is for what we do in the marketplace. So, I guess I need to apologize to the now 2 generations below me. I will start my 30th year in practice in July, but we're seeing less people as a percentage than when I started, right? But that doesn't mean that there's a less demand. So, the people that we're not seeing, if you wanted to see 30 new patients a month and you're only seeing 15, the 15 that we're not seeing are in line at the pharmacy near your office. The 20 or 30 pharmacies near your office. And they're trying to get a chemical answer for a structural problem. Beyond that, they don't even have a concept that there's a potentiality of improvement just way out of just no pain that no one else is going to speak to. So if we don't own it and live in it, we can't change the world. So if you have that red-hot burning desire to do that at a level to where it's your game and you're the captain of the ship, and you're willing to take on the risk, but that if you can do it and be organized and help a bunch of people, you can probably make more money than you ever thought possible, which are the traditional 3 legs of the practice management stool. But really, I have a 4th leg and a 4th concern, which is so that each of us, in exchange for helping, how many individual patients are you going to see in the course of your practice? So I've been involved in 15 practices over 30 years, and the number is in, it's 6 digits. It's over 100,000 patients, I have my thumbprint on, right? And in exchange for that, to make more money than I ever thought possible, and then to accumulate real wealth so that we win too. So I believe that everybody should win, including us. And just as an aside, I think I'm one of the few voices for the actual practice in chiro. So when it's time for you, right, when you know that you know that you need to be in your own office. So I think certainly an argument could be made to come out, and we'll talk about other options in a minute, but to work for somebody else and to see what's out there and to make some mistakes under somebody else's umbrella and safety, and to, even geographically where you want to be. And, if you're dealing with family issues and a spouse in a different city and all of that, I think that you could make a strong argument for wanting to work for somebody for a short period of time. But ultimately, you're going to wake up and know that you know that you know. That's a time to do it. Right? After you feel that you've had the training that you need so that you have the skills to be successful in the marketplace, because, we're talking about both an investment up front as well as, really, it's the finances for the rest of your life, right? This needs to work, and owning any small business is a challenge, and a healthcare small business is a bigger challenge, and a chiropractic small business, healthcare is even a bigger challenge, right? So it's jumping into the deep end of the pool, right? As a guy that learned how to swim in his 40s, I can tell you about the panic of this. But like now, it's kind of exciting, and like it's the same thing with starting a practice, right? It should scare you. Right? And maybe you need to save up some money. So you're going to work for somebody to save up some money, and now you have the money. The question is like, how much is enough? Well, we'll talk about that briefly. So when you think that it's time, right? This might not be the time, right? When you know that you must, that's the time. Like if you think like I'm out 3 years, I guess it's the next thing I'm supposed to do is open my own practice. I don't think that's strong enough, right? So it's when you can do it right out of school if you have the resources, if you have the money, or if you have someone that's going to partner or back you, you can do it, but it's when you're ready to take this running dive into the deep end of the pool. But I'm going to argue that you don't need to do that. That owning a practice, by definition, is not for everyone. So, there are a bunch of other options. The first is that you never really have to practice, and there's lots of different career paths that chiropractors with license can do other than see patients. So I really guess that thought never really occurred to me, and it's my tribute to Dr. Tony Best, who is a chiropractor and little sister and wife to a fraternity brother, Darren White. And, right from meeting her, she had just graduated, and she had no intent of ever really practicing, but has gone on to do a bunch of things. She is now in a big wellness company and leading a wellness push for, hundreds of thousands of employees in different companies. So it wouldn't be really my path to go, but I'm just saying there's other options out there where you don't need to, practice on patients. Right? Second is that you could just be the locum, which is a fill-in doc, and there are a bunch of chiros I know that this is their career, is they do the 3-day gig over here, the 1-week gig over there, the 3-month maternity leave over here, the fill-in when a doctor passes away over there, and they don't have really the risk of practice ownership, but they make kind of a career out of being a fill-in doc. And if you own a practice, and you're in practice by yourself, there's value in having a relationship with a locum that can cover for you so that, you do get a chance to go away and experience some of the other things in your life that are important, right? Being an exam doc, typically you don't have boards, you don't have a license, you're waiting, or it's, an incredible office and you're low man on the pull, and you're going to go in and, it's low man on the pull and it's doing the exam and the paperwork and marking x-rays and report documents and soap notes and all of the junk that isn't glamorous but just as important, critically important to get done. Right? And you move up, you get a license, you start seeing patients, you work as an associate, which is a direct employee. If you get a little bit more courage, right, another pathway is to work in somebody else's office as your own business, but you're paying them either outright rent or a percentage of your collections. Working on, you could partner into a practice, and, as I heard on this call from a dad, right, chiropractic is heavy in multiple generation businesses. I never worked officially with my father. It was always a separate practice. But, it's another avenue where you don't have to open your own practice. But ultimately, when you know that you know that you know, and you want to play that game, and you make that decision, what are all those considerations? So first is to identify, and first might be strong, this is just probably in no particular order. What is the space needs? So 1,500 square feet, double asterisk. So I do my whole coaching program. I have probably 150 hours of presentations on different topics in this kind of format, me speaking over PowerPoints. My asterisks are always very powerful. In this case, it means 1,500 is the standard ideal. If the space that you have offered works for other reason, it's 1,800, then so be it. If it's 1,200, so be it. If you're stuck in Manhattan, like we were, and I was able to rent 900 square feet for $7,200 a month, then 900 square feet has to work. I have a client in downtown Calgary, Alberta, that does over 300 visits a week for years and years and years in under 800 square feet. So you can make just about anything work if you have to, but if I were to ask what's ideal in my mind, then this is the layout. It's 1,500 square feet. This picture is not an actual picture. This is just something I grabbed off the internet. So you should have area for 3 adjusting tables. I am a total fan of the open adjusting area. Second best would be T-bars, so that you have tables behind T-bar heights. Third best would be rooms without doors. Fourth best would be rooms that have doors that could close if you want. I think adjusting people behind closed doors is a practice management mistake and a lost opportunity to have way more fun in practice. So I would argue that if you speak to docs that practice either in the open or semi-open, that their experience is much more enjoyable over the long range. But we should have 3 adjusting tables. We should have 2 full exam report of finding rooms, so that you can do a full day 1 or a full day 2 in either of these rooms, right? So an x-ray dark room, I'm still a big believer that, essentially every patient that I take, I'm going to x-ray. Well, that's technically not true. It's functionally true. I believe that if we're starting a practice and money is a concern, that starting with digital is a financial mistake. I think that you can start with standard with a dark room, and when you hit targets, be able to convert to digital and end up, quote, wasting on the processor and stuff very little money, and it makes much more sense than to go an additional $25,000 to $30,000 in debt up front. So an X-ray dark room, PT rehab suite, area for the front desk, plus. So ideally, to have both the front desk and then the second CA, perhaps a billing CA, be near but separated from the front desk. If it needs to be a totally separate area, then so be it. A small reception area, and then lastly, a DC office. So like in a 750 square feet office, this gets combined into an adjusting area. I'm a big believer that the reception area, otherwise known as the waiting room, should be smaller rather than bigger, right? 7 chairs in reception is gigantic. I'm going to use jump seats in the back for overflow. So if I had 3 tables here in an open area, you could have 10 seats for people to wait. And that adds to the prime time party atmosphere of it. Right? Front desk, I want to be not behind, an opaque glass. Open is preferred. If this is full walled, I'd cut a big hole in it. No little hole with a sliding glass. Right? 2 exam report of finding rooms. I think this is probably something that is the first thing that people kind of ignore in my recommendations, but this would be ideal. In this space, I believe that you could see 500 a week, no problem. Right? And certainly, you're going to be over $1 million at that point, so certainly be able to do $1 million in a practice this size. Again, I have the chat window open if you have any questions or comments. We do have a bunch of docs on the call. I'm excited about that. So feel free to leave me a chat message. And, I just muted myself. Hang on. Just muted myself and then unmuted. So that's the space need. Second is the build out. The build out is getting all the walls and all the outlets and the paint and the carpet and the ceiling and the x-ray machine installed, all that stuff to happen. And it is very, very expensive. Just needing to move one wall and running electrical for an x-ray machine, for example, could end up costing you $8,000. Doing a full build out could end up costing you $50,000 easy, and even $100,000 if you're building the Taj Mahal practice. So this, as I mentioned earlier, was my first satellite practice. It was very unique in that another doc in the area who had done multiple practices, as a matter of fact, This was a practice that he didn't really make work, or maybe he had been burnt out and lost interest at the point, but this was already a chiropractic office. In fact, this is his sign. He never bothered to even take it down. And when he saw that I rented it, he was threatening to come and take it down, and the landlord sent him the cease and desist order, and that sign was up the whole time I had this practice, and it wasn't even my sign. But the point is that if you could not pay for your build out, right, that decreases the amount that it's going to cost to get open and stay open significantly. So that's option one. And you can end up not paying for it several ways. One is to move into a previous DC office, or I've done a previous PT office, or I've done a previous dental office. All of those were pretty easy. I did another chiropractic office another time as well. The second way is, if there has to be a build out, is to amortize it into your lease, meaning you let the landlord pay for it. So say there's a $25,000 build out, just to keep the math easy, and what you agree to do is to pay an additional $1,000 a month rent for the first 27 months even. So over time, the landlord even gets a little bit of a perk, or maybe it's just 25 months. But you don't have to come up with the money up front. If you're big enough, or you have enough deep pockets and you can cash flow it, you just stroke the check and you pay for stuff, and that's ultimately going to become a tax deduction, and you don't owe it and you own it, and that's it. We'll talk about getting the money that we need shortly. For me, so these are all pictures of different associates that I've worked with that ultimately have gone on to both work for me and then purchase a practice from me. It's another great thing that I'm proud of is really the thumbprint on Western Pennsylvania. There are 12 practice sales in Western Pennsylvania, and 2 more practices that I currently still run with associates. This Dr. Jeannie is a Palmer grad, was with me for 13 years. We saw over 15,000 visits a year for all of those years. Dr. Shannon was the doc that bought this practice, ran it, bought it, and has gone on to still maintain one of the largest practices in Pittsburgh today. Each of these have a story, and it's good to share those. So again, just in my coaching, I think that it provides one-to-one accountability, different products that I offer. So just the online academy, you get access to my 150 hours or so for the DC, for the CA, for the associates, for the senior docs. My one-to-one coaching, this is the whole sales that you'll hear tonight. I coach at $600 a month, and it gives you direct access to me with my real-world success. And if my message resonates, those are the clients that always do well. So that was the sales pitch if you were worrying about it. The next thing that's important in opening a practice is making sure that the lease, the legal document, is right. So first, I will tell you that I am not a lawyer, and I am a big fan, and I want to make sure that you hear me recommend that you need an in-state or in-province or in-country attorney to look at whatever your final lease document is. So there's going to be certain professional needs. This is one of them. You need to understand the elements of the lease so that you can negotiate it. So what I don't think that you need is a real estate person that you're going to pay thousands of dollars to negotiate a lease for you. But you need an attorney that you're going to pay a flat rate to look at the final document to make sure that the legalese is correct. So some things to consider in negotiating a lease is, how long do you want the lease to be? So I would look for a shorter original period and then longer options. So imagine that you had a 3-year lease with 2 5-year options. So if things are going well, we have the right to stay there. If things are going incredible or not good, after 3 years, we can be out. Right? I've never done a lease less than that, but if you could do a 1-year lease with options, that would be good too. Just doing a 3-year lease with no options gives the landlord too much leverage if you're wildly successful. Right? He sees that. He knows that you don't want to move, so where are you going to go? you want to make sure that the proper square footage is defined in the lease. So typically, you're going to pay rent per square foot. So for example, if you were paying $10 per square foot, so the way to calculate this is you take the dollars per square foot that they're quoting you. So let's say it's $15 per square foot, and you multiply that by the number of square feet. So let's say it's $15 a square foot for 1,500 square feet. So that comes out to $22,500. That's the annual rent, and then you divide that by 12, and you get a monthly rent of $1,875. So that's typically the base rent that you pay for. You're going to define also, it could be in the lease, is that who's going to do the build out. So if there needs to be a build out and the landlord is going to do the build out, so this is something else. So in a lot of new buildings, like it's just a manila shell, the landlord has money that he has allocated, it's called, in fact, an allocation, for the build out. So when you're negotiating a lease, he might tell you like, well, we have $25,000 allocated for a build out. What that means is that essentially they're going to pay the first $25,000. But if your build out is going to be $60,000, how's the other $35,000 going to get paid? So we're going to define that. If they do the work, there will also typically be like the official work order of the build out. So the contractor or the landlord himself will actually insert a document which is like, here's everything that we're going to do for the build out, and they spell it out. So it's okay, just you want to make sure that you have everything in there. You know, if you forget to add the carpeting and they've already made the agreement, and then you're going to be on the line for the carpeting in that case. If you're in a building that is not standalone and there's other companies, I want to ask for chiropractic and perhaps even PT exclusivity. Right? I've practiced, my main practice was in a business front street where in a 10-minute walk you could get to literally 7 other chiropractic offices. So I'm not really, in Manhattan, every building that has chiropractors has multiple chiropractors. So I'm not afraid to like compete and like, I'll get my share and I'll succeed. But if they're going to give me exclusivity, I'm going to ask for it, and then I don't have even that to worry about it. You want to define who pays for what. So there's all kinds of weird stuff. If there's, this practice, where am I? Sorry. This practice, right, had these big pane glasses. So I lost 2 of them over 25 years. But like it was, $700 each to repair, and after the first one, it was determined that I was on the line for that. So you want to get clear on who pays for what. You want to get clear on what services the landlord will provide. So in some buildings, there's light janitorial services. What about the garbage? Right? We want to be able to define signage. So some buildings won't let you have any signs. Others are more liberal. You want to have a clear understanding of what signage you're allowed to have, and then probably take advantage of that. Parking. Is parking open? Is parking defined? How many spaces do we have? Where are they? And you want to have this concept. So beyond the base rent, right, there's this concept of triple net, meaning that you're gonna pay not only rent, but for the common areas. So again, if you're in a building that has like a hallway inside and there's 4 other bays, you're going to pay a percentage. You're going to pay, if there's 4 other bays and there's 5 of you, you're going to pay 20% of all of the common areas. You're going to pay 20% probably of any tax increase on top of the base year that you negotiate. So what I want you to be able to fully understand before you sign a lease is what's the total cost going to be to you per year of that lease, and to have a full understanding. You want to make sure that you are protected by all the legalese by the attorney. That's why we're hiring him or her. I can do a whole class on lease negotiations. One point is don't fall in love with any one place. If you have 3, 4, 5 different possibilities, if you're out to open a practice, I'm looking to move. I've been in Manhattan for 3 years, and I'm looking to move downtown. So, right, I want to have 3, 4, 5 options, not to fall in love with any one particular space, and it gives me leverage to negotiate. I sense that I won't have that much leverage in negotiating a Manhattan rental project, but like in a lot of areas when you're negotiating for a practice, there's actually, it's a buyer's or a leaser's market, and you can use one deal against the other to make the best offer. So that's my thoughts on lease negotiation. The equipment that we need, right? So first off, right, growing up, some of the earliest memories that I have are moving spring-loaded Zenith high-low tables in my father's office. And if you don't know what a spring-loaded high-low is, it was before there was electronics and pneumatics, and it was actually a counterweight that was controlled by a spring, so that if you laid on the table and you released the button, the table would go down slow. And actually, if there was nobody on it and you released from a down position, you released it, it would come flying up, and that was always an issue. And they were super duper heavy, hundreds of pounds. So just a little side story. The equipment that we need, right? I think you can start off, if you absolutely are stuck with one table, then you start off with one table, right? You can only be in one place at one time anyhow. So if you have one adjusting table, how many people can you see in a day, in a week, in a month with one adjusting table? As we grow, we want to have at least 3 tables. But with 3 tables, again, you can see 100 a day, right? If we get beyond that, you need a 4th table, so be it. Just to finish the high-low story, right? I was probably in practice 17 years before a coach taught me that you don't need the high-low and recommended unplugging them and letting patients get on and off and turn over all by themselves. So I actually became a big fan of these Omni tables. I think this one's actually a VertiLift, but like the stationary Omni tables, I think are workhorses. I think they're super stable, they're super sturdy, they last a long time. You can buy them used for $2,000. I know because I've probably purchased a dozen of them. Right? 2 exam benches. Let's talk x-ray. So I bought a brand new x-ray machine in 1986. The generator, the bucky, all the major parts are still there going into 30 years later, and probably 25,000 new patients, certainly 20,000 new patients. And that new x-ray machine is far from new now. In the other 13 offices in Western Pennsylvania and 1 in New York City, I've purchased used x-ray machines. And I had one of them have a $2,500 failure, and I've had 3 or 4 others that I've had to add like $1,000 to over the years. But, vastly speaking, an 8 to 10-year-old x-ray unit is totally adequate. I would comment that if you're starting out with a processor and not digital, which I probably am going to recommend, I would get a new processor. The used processors that I've had that kind of came in deals that I've made kind of have always been a hassle. But a used x-ray machine with a new processor, you can be functional, state approved, and ready to push a button for under $10,000. And we'll talk about getting the money shortly. So I'm still a big believer. It's a fight that I have, I guess, with the profession, but I'm a believer in x-ray and everybody. Base computers, I think that starting a practice with $20,000 worth of practice management software is a mistake. Right? I think that you can get what you need now in a cloud-based system for no money down and $100 a month. And you can have the practice management software. You probably need 2 computers tops, one at the front desk, one in the doctor's office. Right? Some office furniture. I had a relationship with the used office furniture guy in the McKees Rock section of Pittsburgh. There's a section of Pittsburgh which is called McKees Rocks Down, which is you go halfway over a bridge and there's an exit ramp, and then there's this little community down there that I found when I drove a taxi cab in the early 1980s, but there was this used office furniture house down there, and I would go in and, you pick out a dozen chairs that you're going to put around the office and a couple file cabinets and a couple of desks, and they show up and they throw it in, right? Some posters, and probably not even those used, new rather, right? So you want to get good quality, but you don't want to end up paying the 80% juice for only 20% additional, right? A used Omni table that's going to last forever for $2,000 is a way better value than a new Omni table for $4,000. The $10,000 X-ray machine that will end up with the same X-rays is a better value when you're opening a practice than the $42,000 new digital machine, right? So I'm always going to argue, don't pay more money beyond the quality curve. When you can pay more and get better quality, you should do it. When that curve flattens out and you have to pay way more to get just a little bit more quality, I typically don't think that it's worth it. All right, so how much money do we need and where do we get it? So I think that there are a couple of considerations. So what is it going to cost you to get open? So what is the initial payment to the lease? So typically there's a security deposit and first month rent. So again, in New York City, you need to make that $7,200 a month rent that I needed to make a 3-month security deposit plus the first month payment. So it's like $30,000 just to the landlord. No, that's typically not the case, but what you do want to know what it is that you need to get in. If you're going to be using a Buildout, how much is that? What's the equipment? And then what are you going to live on until you're profitable? And so that begs the question is, how long should it take to be profitable? So I was very excited to hear before we started on the call tonight, a brother that had opened and he met his nut the second month. And that's the way it should be. But how many months operating expenses to run the practice? And if you're the sole provider for the income for you and your family, how much living expenses do you need? So, it ends up being done thriftily, 70 to 100 grand, right? And, you can spend $250,000 with a Buildout, with brand new equipment, with, 6 months of living expenses and operating expenses where you're not making, so if you had 250 grand and that was your business plan, and it's the 5th month and you're only collecting $3,000, you're not even that upset about it because you haven't run out of money yet, but you're going to run out of money quickly, and you need to confront that. So I'm all for trying to get ramped up for as little out of money as possible. So, but that is still a lot of money, which is why, it's another reason why you might need or want or decide to work for somebody first. So where is the money tree? Love this picture, right? So where do we get the money? Well, I don't really know many docs that have done it, but if you've been out for a while and you've been saving, right, you saved up and your wife works and it's family savings and you got it and you're going to make it happen. Or you happen to have a house and there's equity in the house and you're going to bring that and that's what we're going to use. That's better. Taking no debt is better. But typically that's not the real world. So my experience at banks, right, and I've done, frankly, over $3.5 million in practice sales, where well over 80% of that number has been financed from banks, but my experience with banks is pretty negative. So, they're typically willing to lend what you have as collateral. But if you had $70,000, why would you give it to the bank to borrow $70,000? So they look very dimly on brand new businesses and brand new healthcare businesses. So without a cosigner, typically banks are a limited option. So there are some other alternative financial institutions, and one way to go about it is to find a person that writes equipment leases, and either they will write multiple leases for everything that you need to build out, or they'll do one big lease, and then as you buy the stuff, they'll do the paperwork and they'll back it into the big lease, and then you have one payment. And if your credit is good, but you have you have a lot of debt and limited assets, but your credit is good, you're typically able to get a lease for a reasonable chunk of a $30,000 to $50,000 investment, right? I guess that should have been after. Mom and dad should have been first. So mom and dad is exclusive of everybody else in your life. So this is the time to call in all of your chits. So like if you're going to call on mom and dad this last time, or if anybody owes you the favor, or you have the rich uncle, or whoever it is, like this is the investment. This is the biggest project of your life. This is going to ultimately take you from where you are to professional and financial success. So using every resource that you have, this is the time to do it, to find the money, right? There are other types of investors. So if you watch the Shark Tank, those investors are called angel investors. When I work with associates, it's a little bit of a different situation. My game is that I employ docs, and then when I feel that they're ready, I will launch an office with them, meaning I'll finance it, I'll manage it, they work it, and when that practice matures and it's viable, then those docs buy it. So it's not exactly an angel investment, but the question is what percentage of your practice, meaning what percentage of your profit, would you sell to an investor that was willing to give you $70,000 today? So that's an interesting question, and I might want to have some give and take on that in a minute. So be thinking about that. Maybe when I ask for takeaways, you guys can share that. But here's ultimately, like any tough old task that brings a keen sense of worth and power, you have to want it more than whoever it is that's going to give it to you, right? So there's this pile of money, and either the bank has it, or a leasing person has it, or mom and dad has it, or an angel has it, or whoever has it. You want it. You got to want it more than they want it, right? And then you just figure out the path, and it's a matter of, if you're still at no, then you're one no closer to getting to yes. And if you go on that mission, right, while it's a lot of money, it's still an achievable amount to get, and it's part of jumping into that deep end of the pool of really wanting to make practice work for yourself. Next consideration is all of the government BS. This would be something else that you probably want to have your attorney talk to you about. So regardless of where you practice, and for my U.S. friends first, both federally, state, maybe county, and local. So I don't know all the situations, but you want to make sure to ask, what are all the different certificates and approvals that you're ever going to need? So, if you do a build-out, there's typically a building inspector that will come and approve the build-out, ultimately leading to a certificate of occupancy showing that you're legally allowed to occupy the space. Right? In Pennsylvania, you need to exhibit an X-ray registration certificate. What are all the different insurances that you need? So I was in practice in Pennsylvania for 26 years, and then I opened a practice in New York, and like 45 days in, I got a threatening letter from the state of New York. It was a $17,000 penalty demand because when I purchased workers' compensation insurance in New York, I didn't also purchase disability insurance, which is mandated in the law, but it's not mandated in the law in Pennsylvania, and nobody told me that I needed to do it. And I was able to negotiate and only pay a $1,000 penalty. But why even pay the $1,000 penalty? The entire insurance that I didn't have was like $187 for the year. I just didn't know that I needed it, right? And then billing-wise, an NPI number. Here's another one, right? Just incorporating So what business entity should you be? I do believe, again, in the states that you should incorporate. Know, though, that it's not as... I think that you should do it, so we end up being at the same place, but the accountants and the lawyers sell it for more hype than it's really worth. So recognize that in terms of a lawsuit, that malpractice pierces the corporate veil, so like our biggest exposure, we're not protected from because we're a corporation. There are some other advantages, and I think that you should do it. But so again, like in New York, it took about 12 weeks to actually establish a corporation. So again, depending on where you are, just making sure that you're straight with all the different government agencies, because we don't want to be on the wrong side of the red line with the government, right? So if you don't have a certificate of occupancy and now you're open and you're seeing people and they show up and like they're padlocking your doors and they'll get around to inspecting your place whenever, and like if all the T's aren't crossed and all the I's aren't dotted, like they blow you off another 2 weeks, like you're wiped out. So you don't want that to happen. So we get through all this, we find the money, we negotiate a lease, we do the build out, we get the equipment, we're ready to go. While that's happening, I am a big believer in the launch ramp. It was even a image that was available on Google, right? So this is the biggest project of our lives. So in terms of getting your practice open properly, it requires extreme focus, right? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 366 days a year on leap years. That's the type of focus that it's going to be. However, at the end of it, as I said, it's going to provide the biggest payoff. So let's work towards that. So 5 times out of the 15 offices that I've opened, I've been able to work with the doc to get to 100 visits a week in the first 6 weeks. So that's incredible, and like that's what we want to focus on, but it also means that 10 times I haven't. So not all of it, but the first big portion of where you end up when is your internal thermometer, is what you demand of yourself. So the way that you get to 100 visits a week in the first 6 weeks is to have 70 new patients in the first 30 days. 70 new patients, which also means 70 day twos. So I'm a big believer in the 2-day intake. I think I was fighting with somebody on Facebook today about that, right? I believe that the 2-day intake will lead to the highest percentage of people that you interact with in your professional career to say yes to the most amount of care, which is what's best for them, and what's best for them ultimately makes it what's best for us. So to focus, if you wanted to ramp up and to have, cover your operating expenses and start to be wildly successful, it's 70 new patients the first 30 days. So to do that, it's to set up 2 to 4 weeks before you open of solid events. Talks, screenings, health fairs, networking meetings, MDs, attorneys, other leaders in the community. And, imagine that the 2 to 4 weeks before you opened, you end up interacting and screening 200 people or speaking to groups totaling 200 different people. We have a major internet push that we start that's never going to stop. I believe that all of us should be focused on doing things each month, Kaizen, small improvements forever, leading towards 20 new patients a month from the internet. Once we start to get people in from our external events, is to use internal events as a promotion. So I have a new doc running an office for me. Tonight was his first dinner with doc. And he was a little tentative about it, and he was concerned. He likes to kind of have a little bit more certainty. Like I'm a fire, shoot, aim guy, right? He's more of a ready, aim, fire guy. So he ended up having 2 guests at the dinner with doc tonight, but both of them made appointments. So like in terms of like putting your baby toe into that event, like it's still a win, right? So we do a bunch of external events and then we put in internal promotions on them so that in the first 30 days, 35 or more people say yes to a multiple appointment plan, a MAP. So if you intake a patient on day 1 and you think that they need 36 visits over the next 4 to 6 months, on day 2 we're going to tell them that and give them a chance to say yes. And they say yes, and we get half the people that show up to say yes to what's best for them. We get $10K in cash in upfront payments on copays, deductibles, non-covered services, and we cover our overhead in the first or second month. But none of this happens without extreme focus, without a red-hot burning desire to make the business happen. So this is jumping into the deep end of the pool. If you don't want to do this, if you don't want to have all of this risk and put all this money to risk, right, don't do it. But if you have to do it and you have that burning desire, then do it. Get a plan, right? Have a big win at the end of it where everybody wins, including us, and then have a plan for it and make it happen. So what's possible? What's the roadmap? So, this is not the get to 100 in the first 30 days, but it's get to 50 visits a week in 30 days. Pretty much, regardless of where you practice, 50 visits a week is a critical number. It turns out that 50 visits a week is viability. At 50 visits a week, typically, you're able to pay all of your office bills and kind of somehow juggling it all of your personal bills. Now, that's not where I want you to end up, but I want you to end up there first, right? Certainly better than not being able to pay all those bills, right? And again, I want you to have extreme focus on it. I want you to hold yourself to a higher standard. I want you to, this is even more important than your pledge period. This is going to have a bigger payoff for you, right? So 50 visits in 30 days. To get to 100 visits in 3 to 4 months. Right? This is my biggest frustration now with, I believe that 70% of all chiropractors want to get to 100 visits a week and don't ever want to do any more. And I think that it's a serious mistake. I think the sweet spot is 200 visits a week. I think that you should be, if you're going to open your own practice, I think that you should be focused on at least this number. I'm not asking you to be focused on 500 a week. If you are, that's great. I think in 3 years you can build a 500 visit a week practice. I'm all for it. I'm behind you. I'd like to help you get there. But I want all of us to focus on this number, and I want to tell you why for a couple of reasons. One is, the most important reason to me is that, to me, it represents a number that a warrior could plant his flag out in front of his office and raise the flag, and you're a chiropractic warrior. You're doing at least 10,000 visits a year where you're having an effect on your community. And back to the story of big things and little things, right? So that one adjustment for that one patient is a big thing. And you multiply that by a street and a community, and that's our community. And 200 a week is my number. It's Newman's number of, that's the minimum number. Now, there's also another second important reason, and it's how we win. So you don't need to be great at math, but at 200 a week, you're going to collect double what you're going to collect at 100 a week. So at $50 a visit, which I think is a reasonable number to use for this example, at 100 visits a week, you're going to collect $250,000 a year. At 200 visits a week, you're going to collect $500,000 a year. But the question is, in our 1,500 square foot office, how much more is the rent to do 200 a week than it is to do 100 a week? How much more is the lease payment? How much more is every fixed expense to do 200 a week rather than 100 a week? So what happens is 80% of the second $250,000, or maybe 70%, it typically requires more staff. Oh, that was another slide I had. But you can quadruple your profit by doubling the number of people that you see and by becoming a warrior. And that's what I want to have happen for all of us. Right? So staffing up an office, I'm a big believer that up to 50 visits a week, you should do it yourself. Right? If you stably get into the low 40s, you might end up needing a staff. But one of the advantages in your own business, it's going to dramatically lower your overhead. So payroll is going to become one of the biggest challenges and the biggest expenses that we have. It's paying the person, it's paying all the taxes, it's paying the insurance, and it becomes another big responsibility, right? Having made a payroll, right, every other week for 29 and a half years, right, there are some times where I had to move money from Peter so that I could pay all the Marys in the world, right? But understanding everything that goes on in your office, anything that goes on in your business, I believe is the standard. So if you know how to do every single thing in your practice, verifying insurance, turning on the copier, entering into the software, cleaning the developer, everything, then you will never be held hostage by a staff person. But more importantly, you'll be able to hire, train, manage staff much better. So this is not punishment. This is the learning everything there is about your business. But this is like using a calculator. Once you know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, use a calculator. Once you know how to do it and you grow, definitely have a staff person doing $13 an hour work. A $250,000 a year chiropractor, that's $125 an hour. I want you to be focused on doing more of the $125 an hour tasks and let a $13 an hour employee do those tasks. So at 50 visits, I hire my first full-time CA. That goes to somewhere between 100 and 125 visits. At some point, depending on how insurance dependent you are and some other things on what staff does, you may need a second staff, but I know that 2 CAs, 1 doc can certainly see 200 a week, certainly 100 a quarter a week. At 200 a week, I might then have you focus on an associate, and then ultimately at 500 visits a week, 3 DCs with 3 CAs, and it's a pretty dynamic practice, but you end up doing $1 million a year or more. That's a staffing needs, right? So first is the full-time front desk. Well, if you have 1 staff, then she's everything, or he's everything, right? But typically, I'm a big believer that for mature practices that you have 1 full-time front desk CA. She never leaves the front desk. She's responsible for the front desk. She leaves the front desk to pee twice a day, but by appointment. Right? Typically, the next is a billing or money CA, responsible for handling all the money. If you're accepting and in network, this is a much bigger task. If you're not, then this can be split. There's then back office, like clinical assistant, so rehab and new patient assistant. Again, depending on where you practice, if, I've had CAs that are able to do exams. I've had CAs that have taken the x-ray certificate course to where they can actually take x-rays. And so if you can reduce the amount of time that it takes you to process a new patient, so you go in and you meet the patient, you do a consultation, and then you step out and order the exam and x-rays, and then you just go back in to do the first day release, you can end up seeing a new patient in 2 5-minute chunks, maybe a 7-minute chunk and a 2-minute chunk. So that then grossly increases the ability for you to service more new patients. As you start to ramp up, you might need some marketing help. So a person to do all of your computer stuff, to go to events, to help set you up events with you. And then ultimately, I believe that all practices should have at least 2 docs full-time that are working in there, a successful lead chiro teaching an associate, but then it gives great flexibility to the senior doc, and the associate learns what they want to learn. If you're going to do massage, to understand how that integrates into your practice, how does it work money-wise, how does it work marketing-wise, how does it work referral-wise. But it ends up being a full staff. And this becomes a whole art of managing people. The mistakes that I've made, I'm sure it's more than this, but these are some. So first is too much debt, right? Trying to build the Taj Mahal practice off the get-go. The marble counters, the digital x-ray, the $20,000 worth of software, the $50,000 worth of adjusting tables, the $20,000 sign, the 4 grades higher carpet, all of that stuff. The Taj Mahal practice, too much debt. Second is not to really embrace it. Well, this is first, right? This is the most important project of your life. Changing more people's lives, patients' lives, employees' lives, right? If you have little kids, their lives, and ultimately your life. right? The next biggest mistake is not leaving your office. What I mean by that is, particularly in the beginning, but to some extent always, the new patients that we're not getting are outside your practice. You're typically stuck inside your practice. Right? See this chasm there? I'm coming up on an hour. I'm just going to go a little long. I'm almost done. I want to have a little bit of give and take at the end, so if you guys hang in there with me. So it's really being outside your office, in your community, 20 hours a week or more. Right? And that's a mistake to not do. Refusing to have a standard operating procedure. So I'm a big believer in actually a scripted interaction. This is what the phone call sounds like. This is what day 1 sounds like. This is what day 2 sounds like. This is what a regular office visit sounds like. And for those of you that are worried that it feels restrictive, that that's not you, I want to tell you, I'm going to argue that by having a standard procedure, it allows you to be even more of you. So it's why a script is called a script. They've been performing Hamlet for something like 450 years, and each actor brings his or her own interpretation to it, but yet it's still to be or not to be, right? So there are, tell me why you came, tell me what's bothering you today, or, right, you want to get this corrected. There are scriptings that make the experience at a chiropractor's. Another big, huge mistake are weak recommendations. So I believe that it's our job to get all the data from the patient, which oftentimes I believe that we do a poor job on. So a full consultation, a full examination, a full set of x-rays. We get a clear picture of the spine and nervous system. And then from our brains and our hearts, if it were us, if it was our mom, if it was our cousin, if it was our best friend, what would we recommend? And to be able to recommend that because it's what's best to every patient. And to base both on symptomatic relief, but also long-term structural correction, as well as a supportive or wellness type program. So like in my mind, it's 36 visits over the first 4 to 6 months, and then at least, if not more, than monthly after that. Right? And to make these recommendations, and then to have a way to fall back. If people say no, they can say no, but I don't want to say no for them. And then the biggest mistake is not to be a business owner, is to have your head buried in the sand, not to be aware of all of the things that you need to be aware of, and to be executing. So how are you executing on your new patients? How are you executing on your retention? How are you executing on your collections? I'm here and I want to get to here, and here's my plan to get there. In my plan, I've done this, this, and this. I'm working on this right now, and I see some breakthrough coming through. Right? And to really make it a science of management to really hit where you want to be. So I do have a favor, right? I am leading a course for senior docs right now. If any students on the call would be interested in letting me interview you for a chiropractic position, I would like to record that either with some of those docs on the call or just me and you. And if you would like to do that, if you could just email me, drleenewman@gmail.com. That would be a big favor, right? A couple of other really important points is I've had multiple different docs go through this, is when you enter into your own practice, again, because it's the most important project of your life, it will also generally be the most stressful part of your life. I will tell you that divorce was worse for me, but I would encourage you that you don't have to experience that thing. But that taking care of your personal health is paramount always, but to particularly be aware of it as you're opening your own office. So to get extra tight on your diet and exercise, to get a routine to where you can go to sleep and get the proper rest that you need, and to do the things to keep you mentally sharp to avoid both illness and injury, and like certainly death. But this I haven't seen happen, but like lots of illness and injury and odd things happen, so being aware of that. And again, I just want to point this out. It's the most important project in your life, because all this other stuff, your health even, financial, personal development, even hobbies, friends, social, and spiritual development, all happens better when finances are handled. I just talked about divorce, right? the biggest reason that divorce happens is because finances are messed up. That happened not to be the case in mine, but finances lead to divorce. Debt leads to greater stress. So being able to handle all of this, the 10,000 hours that we put in, as Maxim Gladwell talks about, to become masters of our practice, to have a 24/7, 366 attitude. So the balance in life, in terms of working less, you earn that out. Right? So when you're doing 200 a week and now you bring an associate in and you go back to 3.5 days, right? 2, 3, 4 years out and you've earned that, I'm all for that. But right now in a brand new practice, you're $250,000 in debt, another $70,000 for the practice, and you have 2 young kids, right? You got to dig in. There is a pathway out. You help people to the tune of 200 a week. You can make $250,000 a year or more for multiple years, 20, 30, 40 years. You can become a good steward of money and ultimately become financially independent. Here's that definition. Financial independence is when the money that you have earns enough money ongoingly that you never dip in to the money that you have and you can live your life. And even if you reach that point, right, I'm not saying don't practice. And, you still have an income on top of that, even better. But, I want you guys thinking about financial independence and being able perhaps to provide a life for your kids that you didn't have, or a life for your kids that you did have, right? The professionals and vendors that you need, I believe this is my last slide, right, is you need a lawyer. The lawyer's job is to keep everything legal, is to make sure that you don't get tied up in any legalese. You need an accountant. However, the accountant's sole job is to be able to keep you, here's another asterisk, is taxes. That's the accountant's purpose. And I'm a big believer that every April 15th, it's coming up, I've talked to several clients where we've been through this. On April 15th, it's your job to have your taxes filed every year. If the accountant says there's less chance to be audited if we file the extension, I'm calling bullshit. And even if you do file the extension, you have to have the tax paid or else there's a penalty, and they're already getting enough, so why pay a penalty? So devoid of some catastrophe, in 30 years, the only year I didn't file by April 15th was the year I got divorced, right? And so, and once a year is an official time to kind of count where you are. All the taxes are paid, everything's kind of paid off, and this is where I stand right now. And you should keep that tally. And you should have a goal or a focus, and it's probably more than what you think. I want to give you this number, $5 million by age 60 as at least. If you go beyond that, better. You need an insurance person, right? So for your property and casualty, for your umbrella liability, life insurance, disability insurance, all of those are separate topics, but you need an insurance person. You want to try to develop a relationship with a banker, but you don't want to buy into banker bullshit, right? So you'd like to have the relationship, but I don't want to be taken advantage of. An x-ray guy is an important person to have. Maybe it's a woman at this point. Mine's always been guys. But, you want to have a relationship. If anything doesn't function right, you want to be able to get a guy on the phone and get him there that day or the next day at the latest, right? At all your suppliers, you want to try to develop a relationship. And then this last one has really been perhaps the biggest challenge for me, is to have the right relationship with your IT, whoever's going to handle setting up your hardware, maintaining your hardware, and then really where the trouble is the interface between the hardware and the software. So, to develop that relationship. And these are some of the professionals that you need. I believe that's my presentation for tonight. Here's what's possible, right? 100 a week in the first 4 to 6 weeks, that's possible. 200 a year at the end of the first year, that's totally possible. $500K a year collected for 30 years. It's totally possible, right? I was going to build more. I guess I didn't get to it. So I really want you to encourage you to focus on, if you're already open, taking your practice to these levels, but getting open to do that as well. So that's my presentation for the evening. Before you jump off, I do want to hear some takeaways, some things that you heard that maybe shifted you, or any other thoughts or questions that you have. Maybe I'll leave the adult picture up. And let me just start with Brendan. right? So our brother Fred Barge, be the doctor. Are you the doctor? Right? So all I'm asking you to do is to go in with strong conviction and tell the people what you think. If it was your kid, your mom, your grandmother, what would you tell them? And to tell them the same thing, and then give them a way to pay. Let them say no if they're going to say no. But the fact of the matter is, if you own it, the right members say yes. Thanks. That was a great takeaway. Tom Nottingham, a takeaway? I'm just, the guys that put in names I can read. It's easier. Casey, a takeaway? I will unmute all of you, and we'll get some chaos now. Takeaways, brothers? I see you're still out there. Well, in either case, I'm going to conclude the recording.